Hello and welcome to the Enthusiasm Project, episode number 21, maybe 22. I should have checked before I hit record. I was super sure that it was 21, and now that I said 21, it might be 22. Either way, it is the season finale episode of season 1, which sounds super impressive. And so I just wanted to give a quick update and sort of explain that and what season 1 means and then what season 2 means as well. So basically, if you have somehow managed to be here since the beginning and you've listened to every episode, you have my eternal thanks. And that is quite an accomplishment to listen to me talk for that much time. But if you did that, or if you at least listened to the very first episode I did, I kind of explained why I wanted to start a podcast, because I am busy like most people are, and there's work, which my teaching career kind of takes up a lot of time. And then there's my YouTube channel, which is my main hobby and pursuit outside of work, and those two things together take up like all the time. And then, there's things like wanting to be a human and spend time with family and friends and all of those sorts of things. And so why throw a podcast into the mix of all that? And the reason being that I had wanted to start one for many, many years, and I just put it off, and I don't know why. And luckily I found ways to do it that took pretty much almost all the time out of the editing process, where everything could just be done live to SD card, luckily using the Rodecaster Pro, which I've talked about many times. But that makes things super easy to just go straight from brain to SD card, very minimal processing, and then uploading. So it's that helped me a lot, because with YouTube videos, you can film for 45 minutes or whatever, an hour on like a short, like the shortest video I can think of might be something like 45 minutes. And then you go to edit and it could be 6 or 7 hours to edit that all together into something that's great. And that's fun and I love it. But I didn't want another project that was going to take, 6 to 8 hours per finished thing, just because there's not time for that. And the bigger reason for the podcast is, as much as I love YouTube, it is a very specific format, especially for the kind of videos that I like to make, where, if they get 10 minutes or more, I start to get a little nervous. I've never really had any issues with it, but things kind of are expected to be a little more concise, a little bit more clear, straight to the point, and that's good. And, same thing kind of as a teacher, what I deal with is, I love my students and they're wonderful, but they're also teenagers. And so in terms of attention and maturity, like they're just at a certain developmental stage, which means sometimes we can't go as deep into stuff as I'd like, or, I can't go with an uninterrupted, thought, or communicate something clearly in an uninterrupted way for very long. And so I feel like in both these things, it's like I'm constantly being interrupted or abbreviated. And the podcast was sort of this wonderful outlet that I wanted to start, where I could just let go and just let my mind explore these topics. And I didn't want to worry about listens or subscribers or any of that stuff. That's all, that's something that is a big part of YouTube, which is totally cool and fine, but I didn't want this to be that at all. And that is super wonderful. And I've had I've learned so much from doing it. It's the beginning of August 2019. I started the podcast January 2019, doing roughly-ish one a week. There's been a couple little breaks here and there, but it's been super fun, and I have learned a lot. And what I have learned, the most important thing, which is why I'm calling this the season finale episode, is I've learned that I have run out of things to just sort of ponder beyond this just becoming like a diary. And that's cool. Like, I feel good that I was able to get all of that stuff out of my brain. It's been a hugely helpful thing to go through. And I've also learned just a few other things, like I it's fun to be able to sit here and talk and work through stuff and explain things on my own. But I also really love it when someone else is here. So like when Heather's here, I love those episodes. When I did the episode with Rob Bowman and we talked for an hour just about whatever, that was like, my sides hurt from laughing after that. So I really like including other people as much as possible into the show. And then one of my favorite episodes personally is the one, it was the one right before this where I talked about being too old for YouTube. And I was using Monty McKinnon and a few other people as examples. He's like 80 years old, started a YouTube channel a few weeks ago about building guitars by hand. It's amazing. It's wonderful. He's doing a great job. He does like 3 episodes per week. But it was a cool discussion about age on YouTube. YouTube is usually viewed as a platform for younger people, but there are a lot of successful older creators on the platform, and I think that that's super cool. But the thing that I really liked about that episode was there are a couple of things. It had a really specific point that I was trying to make, and I thought that was interesting to explore a specific point. And then I also included a lot of like little clips and things. So, if I talked about something on a YouTube channel, I had a clip ready to play from that YouTube channel. We were talking about age, so I instead of using my normal song, I had clips from They Might Be Giants song titled Older, which was just sort of like a quirky little thing. And I kind of liked adding in all of that stuff. And it took extra time to do that because I had to, track down those clips and load up the songs and all that sort of stuff. But it didn't take that much time. And I still was able to just play them, quote unquote, live as I recorded the podcast. So when it was done, it was still just basic processing and leveling out of audio and then uploading. So it didn't really it took more time in the pre-production of the podcast, but it didn't add anything on to the editing. And I thought that was really cool. And what was super helpful was having those clips to play. Like, I don't want to script podcast episodes just because that's a whole separate thing. I would, it sounds real. I would be so proud to produce something like Serial that's, you're exploring something and it's very scripted and it's just this hugely rich thing. But that is, there's a reason they do 13 episodes every 2 years of those shows, just because there's only so much it just takes so much out of you to do that. But by having these clips, what I found was they were really good, like guideposts and markers. So I knew the order that I wanted to play them because they kind of built the story in a certain way. And I just sort of knew, like, here's the first one, talk about whatever you're going to talk about, but at a certain point, just get it so that you can introduce this in a way that makes sense. Okay, cool. And then from that leads the discussion here. And then you can introduce the second clip and the third clip and the fourth clip. And it made the show really fun to record. And I think it made it a lot more enjoyable to listen to. And that was kind of surprising to me because it was so different from what I originally wanted to do. So I kind of want to do more of that, just sort of like throwing in little bits of structure. There's like little segments that I've been wanting to incorporate just so that regardless of what the weekly episode is about, what the episode topic is, there's just sort of certain things, certain discussions, certain parts that are going to be consistent throughout. So that way it's just, I like that. I know that when I listen to podcasts, my favorite ones, they have a lot of things like that where, I listen to Talking Simpsons all the time. And that's a great podcast where they go through the entire, it's a chronological look at the entire run of The Simpsons. And they always start with like this day in history where the episode premiered on whatever date. And then they look at like what was happening at that time, what movies came out in theaters that week, what was in the news, stuff like that. And, they play sound bites from the show and all that kind of stuff. And it's really enjoyable. And it's cool when you start listening to it, you just sort of expect it. I love like the Minimalist podcast a lot, and they have really specific segments where it's like we're talking about this subject right now, and now we jump over here to this. Like, and I just, when you get into a rhythm of listening to something that has that regularity, it is literally a rhythm, and then it's just, for me, it makes it easier to listen to. And when I started this podcast, a big thing that I wanted to do was make sure that I didn't focus on plays and subscribers. And honestly, I haven't. I have no idea. I don't pay attention to that stuff at all. Whereas like on YouTube, I check it obsessively. But and that's been cool because it takes a lot of pressure off. But it's also great because still sometimes like when I log into Anchor just to upload an episode, just depending on what login screen pops up or where you're going, numbers pop up, and usually I just don't pay attention to them. But if I do notice them, they don't really mean anything anyway, because as far as I am aware, really no podcast analytics are super accurate. Even when it says like this many plays per episode or this many subscribers or whatever, those are generally very vague ballpark figures because there's just not as accurate of a way to measure podcasts, especially now that they're distributed on like 12 different platforms or more. It's just, you really don't know. YouTube's a little different. You can get a little more accurate in terms of your view count, your subscriber count, your watch minutes, and all those things. Podcasts, even, I'm sure if you're willing to spend a ton of money, you could maybe get something that's a little more accurate, but like I don't care to do that, and I don't want to do that. So that's something that I definitely want to keep, is just not caring about that. But at the same time, just because I don't care about how many people are listening doesn't mean that I don't care about the people who are listening. Meaning, I don't want to get bogged down in like, oh my God, this episode was 46 minutes and the average listen time was 3 minutes longer than the 30-minute episode, but it was shorter than the 60-minute episode. That means every episode needs to be exactly 46 minutes. And, people seem to drop off at 12 minutes, so maybe I should throw in like a wacky like I don't want to get into that whole like thing. I still want to just be able to enjoy the podcast. I want to make and discuss things that I care about and that are interesting to me and are hopefully interesting to other people. But I don't want to pay attention to the numbers that come along with that. But I do want to pay attention to, if you are giving your time to listen to this thing, I want it to be worth your time. And I want you, like, I love it when there's certain podcasts I love and like a new episode pops up in my subscription feed and I get really excited. I'm like, yes. And even if it's like, I've been dreading like a long drive or something that's coming up, and then I see a good episode, I'm like, oh, thank God I have like 2 hours in the car because now I have this. That kind of feeling is really great. And if I could make something that made other people feel that way when they see it, I think that would be pretty awesome. I just don't want to get bogged down in the numbers, but I do want to make something that people actually want to listen to. And to be just as honest as possible, I don't know how many people want to listen to me just ramble on and on about, I know they're not super random topics. I try to have like a specific theme, but sometimes I do feel like, hey, I'm going to talk about this, and then it's just me sort of going, and I get worried about repeating myself or getting stuck in a loop or whatever. And so that is one reason that I loved the episode about age, because having those clips to play really helped me make sure it was like a linear beginning, middle, and end. This makes sense and goes somewhere structure. It's easier to do that when there's a second person, because naturally you have a conversation that goes in directions you can kind of plan out where you want it to go, but the other person brings, an entire world to the table, and you can kind of explore that as you need to as well. So I really love that. And that's also another thing that regular segments do. So if you feel like you're just looping and spiraling out of control, you can be like, okay, cool. That's, it's time for this segment now. And so that's just kind of what I've been thinking about, basically looking at what I'm calling season 1, these first 21 episodes, as, the groundwork, the experiment. It's kind of like on my YouTube channel, I did a 30-day upload challenge very early on, where I had made 5 or 6 videos. I've talked about this before. And then for 30 days straight, I just uploaded a video every single day. And there was no audience there on the channel at the time. I think I started that with like 7 subscribers or something. And by the end of it, I think I had like 30 subscribers. So it was not about growing the audience. It was about growing my catalog of videos, but also growing my skill set and figuring out what I liked and what I didn't like. And there were a lot of things in that 30 days that I discovered that I still use in my videos and my channel now. So it just kind of condensed that learning. And that's sort of what I feel like this first run of episodes did, where I had this idea when I started, but then you go through and you make it, and you just sort of discover things that you like and don't like along the way, which give you a little more clarity and a little more direction. And so I want to refresh the way that I record my episodes, and that just seems like a good time to sort of call that season 2, just for the sake of, I kind of wanted to do the thing like the Nerdist, formerly Nerdist, currently ID10T podcast, where it's just been from episode 1 to, I think they were like at 1,020 or something by now. It's just this long run of episodes, which I guess you could still do, but I it's kind of easier to break it into seasons if things are really sort of changing. So you're like, okay, season 1, this batch of episodes, they're kind of like this. Season 2, it doesn't mean that it's going to be another 21 episodes or whatever. It just means it's sort of the things that fall into this realm. And then if that shifts into something else, well, that would be a cool season 3. Because the other thing that I did want to do is sort of, for lack of a better term, find a niche for the podcast. Not because I'm super concerned with like boosting numbers, like I said, but just because I am concerned with delivering quality to the people that want to listen to it. And maybe you're just so interested in me and what I'm saying, how could you not be, that it doesn't matter what I'm talking about. You're going to be super excited about that. I have a feeling that might be a very small percentage of people. So if I can at least gauge each episode around a certain tone or subject or this is something I'm still figuring out, I think that would really help. So that way you kind of know going in, even if you don't understand the topic, even if you don't understand the episode itself, you kind of know what to expect. And like I can think of Reply All as a podcast I listen to a lot that Heather introduced me to, so thank you very much, where it's mainly focused on sort of these odd stories that involve technology in some way. And it could be anything from, drop shipping centers to scam call centers to why things are trending on Twitter. Like it's all over the whole realm of like digital media and technology. And so when you start an episode, especially if it has like a vague title, usually you have no real idea what this episode's going to be about, but but it doesn't matter because you know that it's going to be interesting. So, and I can think of, the Nerdist podcast as the same way, where a lot of it's, pretty much always interviews. And that's the format. It's a conversation. It's not even so much an interview, so much as a conversation. It's usually pretty funny. And even when I don't know the people, or I think I'm not going to be that interested in the person, I trust the podcast enough to know that it is going to be interesting and it is going to be entertaining. And so I want to look at developing something like that. So whatever that means, if that's a niche, if it's focusing more on specific topics, if it's just a structure, if it's a personality thing, whatever it is, I want to make sure that when the episodes pop up in your feed, that you see them. And even if you don't totally understand immediately what it is, that you trust it enough that it's going to be good and it's going to be worth your time to listen to it. So those are kind of my plans as time goes forward. When that's going to happen, I don't exactly know. And one of the reasons that I've sort of been missing a few weeks is just because it's summer break right now, and there's times where I've had time to do a podcast and I'm like, okay, I should definitely record an episode. And then I sort of think like, well, I don't have anything. It would be forcing it because I don't have anything that I really want to discuss, and I don't quite have like a format down yet. And I would rather just stick with, before this, the most recent episode is that age one that I've mentioned. And I would much rather, if people find the podcast, that they see that as the most recent episode because I think that it's really good and I really like it. I'd much rather that be what they find rather than just some random thing where I decided to like fill up 45 minutes or an hour just so that an episode could be released. But at the same time, I think consistency is really key. And it is important to me that it is consistent. So the fact that I haven't been consistent was kind of a light bulb that like, should probably figure out a way to re-kajigger this so that way it's easier to be consistent because there's just that built-in structure and there's like a purpose, and I'm not trying to pull things out of thin air every time that I'm trying to make something. So it's the sort of end-ish of summer. I've been working super hard on my YouTube channel all summer, which has been going great. I finally, as of this week, achieved my goal of having like 4 videos scheduled, and like that eased so much stress of having stuff produced. School is starting in a few weeks, so that's kind of crazy, the lead up to that, because it's not just school starting, but in now until then, there's a lot of work to be done and just planning and preparation and all that kind of organizational stuff. So I don't know exactly when season 2 will start. I would say I uploaded this, or I will upload this on August 2nd. That's the day I'm recording it. It's not a Sunday like normal, but I feel bad because there wasn't one last Sunday. So this is either late or early, however you want to look at it. But it'll probably be a few weeks, so maybe like 3-ish weeks, and then season 2 will pop up. I don't want to start putting out season 2 episodes until I know that I can be consistent with them, so that when it does start, it is every single week. Of course, maybe there's times like the winter holidays or whatever where maybe take a week or 2 off, but other than that, other than those kinds of things, I want it to be super consistent. I think it'll be really fun. I already have ideas, which is actually kind of taking a lot to not just do them in this episode, but it's nice to sort of save things to the start of the next one. So this is a very short episode, and I apologize for that because, well, I don't know. I don't know why I apologize for that, but I do. But I think that's a good explanation. I think that's a great way to wrap up. So if you have been listening, I really do appreciate it. I've gotten no feedback on the podcast pretty much ever. But I do know that people are listening to it. So thank you. Please do not be afraid to offer like feedback or let me know that you're out there, because it's a little, confusing otherwise. But also, more importantly, as I'm trying to reconfigure things and rejigger things, if you've got ideas, definitely send them my way at SoDarnTom on Twitter and Instagram, or of course YouTube, or you can even just send an email to tom@enthusiasmproject.com. However you want to reach out, if you've got ideas, I am happy to hear them, and it might really, really help me out. So I would definitely appreciate that. Otherwise, I hope you have a great few weeks, a great end of your summer, and I will see you or talk at you in season 2. So thank you for a wonderful season 1.